if I want to store a number into the memory, then how can I do that? First, I need to declare a variable of integer type like this, int a equal to some 10. So after declaration, I have to store that number into the variable. Suppose if I want to store one more number into the memory, then I have to declare one more variable of integer type, and I have to store that number into the memory. Like this, suppose my requirement is like I want to store the roll numbers of all the students in a class into the memory, right? So for a class, nearly how many students will be there? Around 65 members will be there. So my requirement is how to store the roll numbers of all the 65 students, right? For this, what I have to do? I have to declare variables and store the roll numbers, right? Int I equal to 1, int j equal to roll number 2, int k equal to roll number 3. Like this, how many times I have to do? I have to declare 65 variables, right? Tell me now, is it a good approach? Like declaring 65 variables for storing 65 numbers, is it a good programming approach? No, right? The answer will be no, right? To overcome this, what Java people have done, they have introduced a concept called arrays, right? So using arrays, what we can do for storing the roll numbers of 65 students, we can simply declare one integer array, right? So one integer array can store new int of all 65 roll numbers, right? So if I want to store the roll number of first student, then using index 0 I can store array name of index 0. So in this, what can I store? I can store the roll number of first student. If I want to store the roll number of second student, then using index 1 I can store the roll number of second student, right? So is it simplified or not? Rather than declaring the 65 variables of integer type, what I am doing here? I am declaring one integer array and storing all the 65 roll numbers into that array using index, right? So to overcome the drawback of individual variables, we have introduced a concept called arrays, right? But there are also some limitations with these arrays. Now we'll see what are the limitations that are there by using the arrays, right? The first limitations of using arrays is the size of the arrays is fixed, right? So suppose I have declared an array which can store 65 elements, then is it possible for me to add one more element to that array? Rather than 65, I want to store some 66 student ID into the array. Is it possible? It is not possible, right? So what is the limitation, drawback of arrays? The drawback of arrays is the size of the arrays is fixed. So, while declaring the array, if I declared an array of 10 elements, then what I can do? I can only store 10 elements into that array. If I declared an array of 20 elements, then I can store only 20 elements into that array. The size of the array is fixed, right? So I suppose assume I have declared an array of 10 elements and I want to add 11th element into the array, right? Is it possible to do that using arrays concept? It is not possible, right? This is the main drawback of using arrays. And one more drawback of arrays is arrays can store only homogeneous data elements. What? Homogeneous. What is homogeneous data elements? Using arrays, we can store only similar data elements. What? Similar. Right? Suppose I have declared an integer array. That means inside this ARR array, I can only store elements of integer type only. Right? Suppose if I try to store, suppose ARR of 2. If I try to store other rather than integers like 1.25, what is this? It is a float number, right? If I try to store a float number into an integer array, then it will leads to errors, right? So what is the one more drawback of arrays? Using arrays, we can store only homogeneous data elements, similar data elements only. If it is integer array, I can store only integers. If it is character array, I can store only characters. It is not possible to store an integer, a character, a floating point number, or a student object into the array. It is not possible. This is the second drawback of using arrays. Then one more drawback of arrays is that is the third drawback. If I want to insert an elements into an array, what is my requirement? I want to insert an element into an array. Then how can I do that? Programmer have to do it explicitly. Suppose I need to find out the which index number I need to insert that element. So which index is free, then I have to write this name of the array followed by index number some 3 equal to 5. Like this I have to write the code explicitly for doing the operations like insertion, deletion, searching, sorting. So for all these operations on arrays, programmer has to write the code explicitly, whereas no predefined methods are available for arrays. This is the third drawback of arrays, right? So to overcome all the drawbacks of these arrays, collections has came into existence, right? So why we are going for collections? We are going for collections to overcome the drawbacks of the arrays, right? So what benefits can we get by using collections? What benefits can we get? Right? So the first benefit is the size of collections is not fixed. That means once we created the collection object, we can store n number of elements into that object, right? So the size of the object can grow and shrink according to the programmer requirement, right? So what is the advantage? So the size of the collection object is not fixed. It will grow or shrink, that means gets reduced according to the programmer's requirement. What is the second advantage? The second advantage of using collections is, using collections we can store both homogeneous and heterogeneous data elements. Homogeneous means similar kind of elements. Heterogeneous means you can also store distinct type of data elements, right? Suppose if I am having a collection object like this. In this collection object, I can store different type of objects, different type of objects. Suppose I can store one student object which belongs to student class, and I can store one customer object which belongs to customer class, and I can store one bike object, I can store one a fruit object. Like this I can store so different type of objects into a collection object. So what is the advantage of collections? The first advantage is the size of the collections is not fixed. It can grow or reduce according to the program requirement. And what is the second advantage? Using collection object we can store either similar data objects or dissimilar data objects, that means heterogeneous data objects. What is the third advantage? The third and very important advantage of collections is, so all the collection objects have predefined methods. All the collection classes and interfaces has predefined method. Suppose if I want to perform some searching or sorting operations using collections, then there will be predefined methods available which you can just call